Welcome to Tellis Like It Is, an episode on which we try and bring out the person behind the personality. Today is going to be a real job for me. But it really is an interesting premise that we set. And we have really interesting people on the show. Now, Rumi, I think, once said, raise your words, not your voice, because it's the rain that grows flowers and not thunder. I have a young lady with me who, in this world of raised voices and animated debates, keeps her calm, keeps her composure, but is really insightful and really prods in the right places. Well, you don't need to believe me, there are millions upon millions of Indians every evening who tune into her on television, on national television. I'm really privileged, I'm really privileged and proud to have with me today Faye DSouza. Faye, thank you for coming on over.
It's a pleasure. You got through that entire thing without a fumble. I'm so proud of you.
Twice. I learn from people on television, Faye.
Yeah,
what can I say?
We promised that we would be really nice on this show. So it's be really nice.
You will?
I'll try. How long is the show?
You are going to be struggling so much, Faye, and I feel for you. So just be yourself, no?
So for those people who don't know, Brian and I are actually related. And obviously you won't believe us because I'm so much better looking than him. But
even if you say so yourself. If you say so yourself.
But we only discovered this a couple of years ago, and so while there's a lot of laughing going on, let's do justice to the conversation.
At some point.
Let's get to work. Okay, all right.
Okay, I hate to say this, Faye, but now you're rich and famous.
I'm not rich.
You're not rich?
I'm not rich.
You're allowed to lie on this show. I won't debate that for too long.
Actually, we should put that out as a PSA to all young people who want to be journalists. Journalists work on terrible salaries. Terrible, awful salaries. You do the job for the satisfaction of it. So that's, I think, part and parcel of having that job.
Actually, that's a great way to start this chat. You've kind of crafted your way into the lives of millions of Indians from radio into television. Mm-hmm. Give us a little overview on that journey, on where you are at the moment. How do you feel when you're communicating with millions upon millions of people, speaking about sensitive stuff, personal stuff? How do you do this?
So obviously now in the sort of era of Instagram and social media and things like that, communications become a lot more personal. People find out more things about you than has ever been the case in the past. And I know a lot of people feel like they know me personally because they're following me on Instagram or because we're so open these days. But I think I had the very good fortune of having some amazing teachers and having a fairly sort of strong upbringing in terms of what we believe in, what our principles are, our sense of justice and equality. And to be able to share some of those thoughts with people, either on comments while covering news stories or on social media, I think is a privilege. I've realized only, sort of after I started working, that I had the good fortune of having some amazing people teach me. And some of that stuff has stayed with me. And I think it's a privilege to be able to pass that on to other people in whatever way.
But are there moments when you're intimidated?
Intimidated, you mean when I'm doing a show?
Yes.
No, not really. No. Because at the end of the day, when you're doing a show and you know that, it's the anchor or the person who's sort of handling the show who's the most powerful person there.
Yeah, but you get pretty intimidating people on your panel, for instance.
Yeah.
Or people who belong to organizations that that could create problems for you. I'm saying.
Yeah.
Do you ever spend time thinking about that? Does it come in the way of your pursuit of truth and justice? And
well, sometimes I think about it after the show's over, when I'm driving home, and when I'm locking my car and thinking, oh God, I can't believe we did that. But in that moment, no. And also I've always believed that, I treat each show as an opportunity that may not be there the next day. So I want to be able to do justice to that opportunity, to the show, to the team that works on the show, to the people who are watching it, who have certain expectations of the truth from the show. So I believe it would be perhaps dishonest towards all of these people, to not, to be intimidated or to pull back or to in some way allow something that shouldn't be allowed. So,
there's a common accusation against, let's say, anchors or moderators,
yes.
especially on television, that says they are meant to moderate the show and not be overly opinionated or drive, the show in a certain direction. And we know of classic cases, that overly dominate a discussion. You draw a fair balance between probing for the truth, driving home a point, and actually listening to your panelists.
Yes.
Which very many anchors don't, right? Yes. Do you have a problem drawing that balance of, between listening and expressing strong opinion?
So that's actually an excellent question, because a lot of people ask that question. So a lot of people right now are sort of romantically talk about the days of Doordarshan. When you had someone who would just come and sort of read out the news and go away saying, oh, those were such good days. I have read news on All India Radio. Back at that time, Prasar Bharati, as it is today, would read news that was cleared by the government of India. That's not ideally news either. It may have been in a more polite time. So there are two things to separate here. One is the actual style of putting out the news. The other is what the news is. So if we just talk about style, for example, back when Doordarshan was reading the news to you, there was no other sort of distraction. Everybody would come in at the same time once a day to listen to half an hour of news. Now, there are a lot of distractions. Your phone's going off, your dog's barking, your doorbell's going off, your wife's calling you into the other room. So there's all of this going on, and there is a television anchor trying to get your attention. Which is why I believe the industry went into that space of, cluttered and, noisy and tighter frames, just generally giving you the sense that I'm in your face because this is important. When it comes to the shouting or the listening, I honestly believe when we went through this process, and I remember actually we had to bring in some hygiene onto the air because it's an audio-visual medium,
Sure.
that. And if people can't understand you, then there's no point. You've wasted the audience's time. True. And the panelists' time. So we had to instill buzzers in the beginning, where we would tell all of our panelists that you'll be given 2 minutes to make your opening statement, and then a minute each to rebut. And we had a countdown going on the screen and a buzzer that would go off at the end of 2 minutes to prove to them that they're all getting the same amount of time to speak. And so over a period of time, once we brought that in and people got used to the idea that, okay, if I come onto this show, I will have enough time to speak and equal time as other people to speak, then people started sort of respecting that time as well. And we moved again, and so it was a process because the audience had to move with us. We moved again to bring in more and more experts and less opinion. So for example, if we're talking about the economy, I would rather have someone who can give me more information about the economy or help me and my audience understand it better, rather than have someone who will give us like some shouty opinion.
Right.
So I believe that the audience sort of also, it's respect to intelligence, right?
So the difference is you keep the audience strongly in mind when you're curating
all the time, yes.
and running a show, which seems very, very apparent. Another debate, and I'll draw a radio analogy. I'm a little more comfortable drawing analogies on radio.
Yes.
There was a time when we felt we needed to play music that appealed to us, and we believed it would appeal to audiences.
Yes.
Obviously, we slowly got professional, or as professional as we did, and there were dipstick surveys done, and long story short, we then started to play music that research told us the audiences would like.
Wanted.
It wouldn't necessarily deeply resonate with my personal choice, okay? Unless it was my show. Use the same thing on television. You obviously are a very strongly opinionated person. I know that. Okay, to say the very, very least.
Yes.
And yet, you're a moderator, you're a host on TV, and you're talking to a bunch of people who are as fiercely opinionated as you are, one way or the other.
Yes.
How do you draw that mix? Do you hold back? Do you thrust your personal opinion into the mix?
So to begin with, so to take your sort of radio analogy, the difference, of course, between what is done on radio and what is done on news is that news, and they teach us this on the first day of journalism school, day one, that news is not about what you want to know. It's not about what I want you to know. It's about what you need to know. It's what the audience needs to know at that time, which is why, a lot of people come up to me and say, oh, but news is so depressing these days. Like, there's such bad news, but that is news. I mean, I'm not here to make you feel better. I'm here to tell you what is going on. I'm here to give you information that you need to know. And I have this sort of pet peeve right now with young people who don't read the newspaper and don't watch TV and don't have any sort of solid news source. Because what's happening then is that they've got these apps that are pushing information that they want. So there'll be someone, for example, who really likes football, European football leagues. And so whatever app they're on or whatever social media they're on will start to send them more and more of the stuff they're clicking on. So now we have a young person who is an expert on what Messi has done for the last 2 months, but knows nothing about what's going on in their own country. And that makes for really scary voters and a very scary democracy when you raise sort of a population like that. So my point is that when choosing a story, we can't, and there are news channels that are doing this, that are sort of agreeing with the majority opinion because that way they get larger viewership. But that cannot be the case. You have to necessarily tell people what they need to know, not what they want to know, not what they'd like to know, not what makes them feel better, not what panders to the emotions of the mob, for example. It has to be delivered like vitamins.
Looking at it from a news perspective, I completely agree with you that we need to be informed. I'm using the proverbial glass half full versus half empty, or cribbing that I had no shoes till I saw a man who had no feet. There's always perspectives. And I just feel quite strongly actually that depending on what the medium of consumption is, we need to be getting a wider, as you rightly pointed out in the newspapers, you get a wider kind of list of options of what to digest.
I mean, personally, in my point, I feel that if you're drinking single malt, then glass half full is not so bad.
True that. With a couple of
cubes of ice.
Yes, absolutely. If you had any doubts about what floats her boat, that's now cleared.
This is not TV, right?
Now, speaking about where you developed your taste for good malts, going back to the early years, you were born and spent early years in the South, in Mangalore.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your early growing up years, what influenced you, the fun you had, the education bit, the family.
Yes. So I was actually born in Chikmagalur, which is a little town outside of Bangalore. Most people know it as the place from which Indira Gandhi fought an election once in the 80s. It's largely coffee country. It's where coffee is grown in Karnataka. Other than Coorg, it's beautiful space. My parents had, a coffee estate, sort of a farm back then. We had cows and goats and, all the animals you could think of, chickens in the backyard, and my mum would grow her own vegetables. I was there for, I think, the first 5-6 years of my life. But a lot of those memories are really strong. And my folks were very proud sort of agriculturists. So my dad would spend a lot of time teaching us about plants and teaching us, and I have this vivid memory of him. Whenever as kids we would want to waste our vegetables, right? Because nobody ever wants to eat your vegetables. And he would actually sit there and tell us how long it takes to grow lady's finger, bindi, and how long it takes to grow rice, and how long it takes to grow a brinjal, and how much work the farmer has to put in to every piece of food that's on your plate. And it's sort of built in, I think, through all my siblings. I have 3 siblings. A sort of deep respect for food and for the agriculture process and for nature and for trees. And it's through the last 2 years, one of the things that I felt personally very, very strongly about were farmer problems, because I realize, and it's an active sort of base for me, right? It's a foundation for me. I realize what it means for a farmer. And I remember being, in the estate when one hard rain would ruin a crop. Like one sort of badly timed rain that comes in when nobody's expecting it could completely ruin months of work. And I remember what that meant to farmers. So
Agree. Fiercely opinionated. I did say that earlier. And has an opinion that really leaves you thinking or thirsting for more from where that came. Which reminds me, you spoke a little bit about you spoke about how your family influenced who you are as a person, and that was well taken. But surely education played a role in who you are today as well, Faye.
Yes. So I actually went to a school in Bangalore called Holy Angels Primary School, which was...
what were you doing in a school called Holy Angels?
Making the others look good.
True.
But I was largely a dreamer in most of early school, sort of faded into the background. College is when I actually came into my own. I went to Mount Carmel College in Bangalore, which largely happened because my older sister topped the university and they gave me a seat expecting that we would be alike. So my sister was this brilliant young woman who had topped Bangalore University and scored nearly perfect marks in her BCom. And immediately after that, I applied. And
what happened to you?
I don't know.
I get 1 in 10 chances to have the final say, and even that is debatable. But so
I got a seat in that college, and it really is an amazing place for young women. I honestly believe it doesn't just sort of give you an education, it sort of raises people. So it raises personalities. We have teachers who invest, and I was studying commerce at that time, and I was pretty decent at like maths and commerce and accounts and stuff like that. But I had one English teacher called Radha Ramswamy who was really good. And she sort of forced me to think about writing, to think about, the entire liberal arts point of view, which I hadn't even considered up till then. So I joined the Public Speaking Association, I joined the Creative Writing Association. By default, all of us are in the choir at some point. So there was a lot of extracurricular stuff. It's a very safe place to find yourself. And I found myself.
Yeah, man, you sure did, Faye. You sure did.
And nobody's been able to shut me up since.
I know. Lots of people have tried and continue to try. Present continuous.
Yes.
Yeah. But I suspect a lot of them, including me, are happy failures at this. Because really, honestly, you have jewels or pearls of wisdom to share. That's about education. And then marriage happened to you.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I moved to Bombay to work with CNBC back in 2004. That's when I met Sagar, my husband. We were colleagues at that time. Although we didn't pay any attention to each other for about 5 years.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
You were colleagues and that was it?
That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. We started working again closely together in 2008 when we both joined ET Now in the Times Group during the launch phase. And I got to know him, and it's really been the most empowering relationship in my life. He believes more than I do in my abilities. He sees greater things in my future than I could possibly. And he's sort of been like it's different to have a cheerleader, but to actually have someone work as the engine. So I keep telling him that, he's the chef, the salt, and the heat when it comes to sort of making me who I am.
That's great. I've had the privilege of hanging out with you guys, and you all complement each other really, really beautifully.
Thank you.
Truly, you've got to say this. One may be a little more, vocal than the other. No, and I say this in a nice way. But I can sense and see complete kind of, acceptance and communication between the two of you. And that's great, man. Happy marriages, given the fact that the religions differ.
Yes.
And that's what I enjoy about your marriage as well. We tend to sometimes give way too much importance to the religion we were born in.
Yeah.
Which is a great thing if it works for us, but we should be equally welcoming of everything else around us.
So I think the word for it would be ridiculously blind lucky, because we have amazing parents, both of us. So I think the best part about this is you get to have 2 moms and 2 dads.
Yeah.
And they were extremely supportive, and extremely open, and they gave us the room to sort of figure our own sort of scene out, in the sense that,
that's great.
you know, what we do between the two of us. And we've now reached a point where he happily comes to like Christmas Mass and Easter Mass, and he's very active about where's my candle, and you know, because he knows that, oh, I have to have this candle for Easter and it shouldn't burn me, and
I have to pray really hard for this lady whom I call my wife.
Yes. And I look after Diwali completely. It's my thing. I do the rangoli, I do the, you know, I set up the puja, I put the lights out in the house, you know, I do all of that. So we found sort of a rhythm that works for us. And our parents first gave us the room, and now they support that rhythm, which is...
How brilliant is that? I'm so glad we're talking about this, and I'm hoping that all of you are listening to this almost perfect story. I'm tempted to say it really is.
You know, it's really funny. So on Twitter, I get trolled a lot, and people call me Christian and feminist, which I find funny because neither of those things are an insult, by the way. Yeah. And then they call me Hindu hater, and I'm so tempted to share one photograph of Sagar saying, at least there is this one that I don't hate. That we know of, at least one. So we have this really great system. We have really great parents who sort of encourage it. So, and the best part about it is, so Sagar comes from, he's a Gokhale, so he comes from a family that has a very deep tradition. And it's taught me to really respect, you know, where they come from, what their ideas are. He respects and, you know, sort of takes part in my family's traditions and their ideas. And I think that's the important part. It's not about, I don't have to believe what you believe. I have to respect what you believe.
Yeah, well said.
And, you know, I think that's what we were raised to know, that, you know, when enough of people come to one place with faith, God is there. And it would be a waste of time for us to argue your God or my God. If, you know, if you believe your God is all powerful and I believe my God is all powerful,
c'est la vie, so be it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Beautifully said.
So, I mean, I just think that it's about respecting the other person's faith and the other person's sort of beliefs and emotions.
Okay, I'm going to shift focus to, I know you're a voracious reader. And off and on, we've spoken about, you know, thoughts and beliefs that you've pulled out of stuff that you've read. Tell us a little bit about authors you love reading, things that influence you.
So I started reading very early actually, to a point where people wouldn't believe that somebody that young was actually reading and not just looking at the pictures. My dad started me off very early. I was terrible at sports. I hated to go out and play with the other kids. So I would just sit at home and read instead. And my dad would make me sit next to him, and he read a lot. And he would give me these books that were obviously ahead of my age, and he'd say that if you hit a word that you can't understand, ask me. So I'd sit next to him, and that was our thing. We would read together. And books were expensive. So I wound up, you know, so every year for Christmas and for my birthday, we would get one book, which would take me a week to go through. And then I would read my sister's books. And then go through, you know, go into my dad's sort of cupboard and pull out his stuff. So it started that way. I read everything I could get my hands on. Now I find, I find that, you know, reading, I'm reading a lot of feminist stuff, because I believe that the feminist movement, which started, you know, officially in the 70s, but much, much before that, in maybe the 20s and even before that in India, is an evolving movement. Every generation of women come in and push the envelope a little further, and then the next generation come in and push it even further. So it's a continuous movement. And I believe that reading what women in the past have thought about it, and what women today are saying about it, and across the world, in different parts of the world, sort of opens my mind up to what's going on around us. And it's important to also understand where all of this is coming from, and why we believe what we believe, and how do you get to the root of that problem? How do you find solutions for the problems you're facing?
Do topics drive what you read? Do authors drive what you read? Is it a mix?
It's a mix. So actually, after a really long time, I was able to actually go to a bookstore the other day, and I bought like a stack of books, which, you know, sort of beats sort of ordering it online. It's always nice to go into a bookstore. It's so lovely. I wish we had more time in our cities to spend in public libraries and you sort of discover books. And I used to have this trick in the Mount Carmel library where I would open the back of the book and see how many times it had been checked out. And that's obviously evidence of the fact that it's a good book. And,
Absolutely.
So the things that only have one stamp on it is, give it a pass.
Give it a skip, yeah.
Yes, give it a skip.
So that is reading. Any favorite authors you want to recommend?
So right now I'm reading Maya Angelou. All of it. I went to Blossoms in Bangalore. People in Bangalore will know it's a little bookstore that started in what was no bigger than a telephone booth and is now 4 floors of second-hand books. It's amazing.
How cool is that?
So I bought the entire stack of all her work, and I've been reading it slowly because I'm afraid I'm going to run out, and then
And then what?
Yeah. So she pushes you to think in a different way or to empathize in a different way. It was largely the feminist movement and sort of the African American equal rights, civil rights movement that happened in the US at the same time in the 60s. But I feel that it helps us sort of understand or question what we're doing in India and understand how we can deliver equal rights, civil rights to everybody in India as well.
Dwelling on that topic, I mean, it is pretty evident that you feel really strongly about women's rights.
Yes.
And gender equality. Pretty apparent. But
yeah, like Maya Angelou said, she said, someone asked her if she's a feminist. She said, well, I've been female my entire life. It would be ridiculous not to be on my own side. So it's true.
But you feel really, really strongly about it.
Yes, I do.
Even about gender equality, about accepting people for who they are and not their sexual orientation.
Yes.
LGBT rights and, all of that, you feel really strongly. And it's really wonderful in today's world to see someone who's not afraid to say it out loud, not afraid to propagate that thought. It really is. And we need a load more Faye DSouzas. You obviously feel strongly, and A, want to say thank you on behalf of, all the viewers. And B, want to know where did that come from? And,
Well, I was living in Hyderabad for a year. And my roommate was this wonderful gay man who I love very, very deeply and is one of my closest friends. And I've always had members of the LGBTQ community as close friends. And once you spend time with anyone, you will realize that all people want is the same thing you and I want. They want someone to love. They want someone to love them back. They want to be able to build a life of security and, hope. And be able to feel like they have equal opportunities. I think this is fundamentally what all human beings want, right? So if you and I start working on something really hard today, that I have as much of an equal chance as you as succeeding, provided I work just as hard as you, or provided I'm just as talented as you are. Nobody wants to feel that they are at a disadvantage either because of their caste or their gender or their sexual orientation or which state they come from. Fundamentally equal rights across feminism and LGBTQ and anything else is just that if we start today and we both work equally hard and we're equally talented, I will have as much of an opportunity to succeed as you. That's it. So, and I think that it's, again, we both come from a religion that believes it's a sin to be homosexual.
Right.
We have to be open-minded to simply note this, that we know far more today than we did 2,000 years ago. That's what science and technology has taught us. We're evolving as a race. Our understanding is better. So we cannot hold on to ideas that were written down thousands of years ago. We just can't. We have to see it from the perspective of who wrote it and what life was like back then and what life is like today, and we know better. The truth is that, even for those people who want to be selfish about their money, if we include every member of the LGBTQ in our workspaces and give them jobs, our GDP will go up nearly 1% in this country. If we include women, it will go up 20%.
That's a huge stat.
Yes. So there is a money sort of pitch we can make for this as well. I mean, do you know that India's female workforce has actually fallen in the last 4 or 5 years? Fallen. Women have been dropping out.
No,
why, you ask?
Women have been dropping out, or have they been kept out? What? I want to know that.
So when the going gets tough, and the going is tough in the economy today, women are the first ones to lose jobs. They're the first, and they find it more difficult to get jobs again. And these are not, we're not talking about daily wage laborers, we're talking about female engineers working in engineering companies, in IT companies, It's far more likely that someone with a small baby will be either asked to go or be put on a part-time thing and then asked to go. And once that happens, it's far more difficult in a bad economy for her to find a job again. Then at home, between husband and wife, it's always the husband's job that wins. Not always, I'm an exception, but, but that tends to be the case. So we see a pattern, and there's research that's been done about this, about the fact that our, what we call female participation in the workplace has actually fallen. And it has fallen not in daily wage, but in offices, especially tier 2, especially areas like engineering and sort of IT and tech and things like that, that tend to be more male dominated. So
that's a crazy stat that you just threw at us.
It's really sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's sad that you didn't already know this. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. This is
right.
information that you should know.
I humbly submit it's something we all should know.
Yeah.
And it's a win-win.
It's, in fact, when the 377 argument was made before the Supreme Court and they knocked that out, the argument that was placed by the very brilliant lawyers who fought that case was that we need this community to participate in our economy. They need to be given jobs. We need to make sure that they're able to come out and work. Because if we take the transgender economy, for example, what we call the hijras in India, they're not given jobs at all. Nobody hires them. They're forced to then resort to either sex work or begging. And then the police sort of get on their case because they say, oh, you're begging or you're working as sex workers, and they're constantly being harassed and abused. All of this can be solved by simply giving them jobs. Just give them jobs.
I know. Seems so simple, right?
Yeah.
You've mentioned working hard more than a couple of times in our chat. And
yes.
God knows, as we do as well, that you do work really hard based on your ability to, based on your passion to. Do you find time to do things that float your boat outside of work? I know you're passionate about what you do and you love your work, but outside of the conventional work day, what keeps Faye DSouza, smile on heart, smile on face, So
here's the thing. I recently learned how to swim, which, I've always loved water. And I suppose when we were growing up, swimming is an expensive thing, which we couldn't really afford to do. And then we didn't have access to pools. So I've learned now. And Mickey Mehta taught me, and he's absolutely brilliant. It's one of the things he really knows how to do well. And it's just opened up this whole new world for me. And so now I plan all my holidays or any time off around, is there a pool? So that I can spend more time in the water. I hope to someday dive as well.
I was just going to tell you that. You took the thought out of my mind.
Yeah.
You should dive.
Yeah, I really hope
I've done it a couple of times actually. I need to do a lot more of it, but it's just a whole new world.
It's a whole, literally. We were in Mombasa on holiday, and it was the first time I actually swam in the ocean, like in the open ocean without a life jacket, on my own, from a boat. And sort of dipped and dived a little bit to see, to see the fish, and it's a sort of sanctuary of sea life in that
right.
ocean that we were in. So it was gorgeous, and I decided I'm going to spend more time doing that. I love food, as is obvious. I used to be able to cook a lot before work started taking up so much of my time. So I like to do that once in a while, and I enjoy doing that.
Your most mouth-watering dish?
Me? So Mangalorean fish curry and prawns, and I do really good like roast chicken, barbecue, that sort of thing, which my dad taught. That was my dad's side of thing. My mum's side was sort of the Mangalorean sort of food. And my parents are big male people, and we're a big family. And when we were 13, my dad, actually both of them, as a rule, decided that cooking is a life skill and everybody must learn how to do it. So all of my siblings, my brother is an excellent cook as well. Everybody cooks. They just decided that this is something you must know how to do. So at 13, we were all, my dad would call us into the kitchen.
How beautiful is that? Again, breaking myth, right?
Yes.
And common belief, which is so irrational actually when you look at it. Certain things always done by the lady, certain things always done by the gent. Those days are behind us, hopefully.
Yeah, I grew up, my dad would do everything. When we were growing up, he would cook, he would clean, he would, give us baths. He would get us ready for school if my mum was out of town or whatever. So we grew up seeing that, and we were told constantly that it doesn't matter whether you're a guy or a girl. These are things you just need to know how to do. So again, we grew up in a system where everybody had jobs to do at home. It was not the maid's job or the girl's job or the boy's job. You had to make your bed. You had to, one of us would sweep, one of us would swab, one of us would wipe the dishes and put it back. So everybody learned to do everything.
Makes you a real person, right?
Well, I'd like to think so.
Yeah, no.
It sort of makes you appreciate, I think, the effort, first of all, it takes behind doing these jobs, which I think is important. And if at any, my mom would always say this, she said, you never know in your life if you'll have a maid or a washing machine, or what if you have to wash your own clothes at some point? So you should just know how to do it. And she was right, because when I moved to Mumbai and my first salary was 7,000 rupees, and I was paying 2.5 out of that to one auntie in Amboli, Nandiri, to live in her attic. I had to hand wash my clothes on the bathroom floor. And I was like, I know how to do this.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Faye, how do I say this right, man? Always a privilege to meet up with you and chat, and this one's been really special. Obviously, like I said, at the top and right through the chat, a lady of conviction, a lady of passion, a doer rather than just a talker, all so well appreciated.
Thank you.
I'm sure there's one thought that resonates even more deeply than the rest with you. I ask as I speak, but I'd like for you, if there is a special thought in your head that you want to share with the world at large, enjoys a special place in your heart, happy or otherwise, and you want to say it to the world, here's one small chance to do it.
Yay! Okay. So 2 things I want people to sort of keep in mind. One is plastic. Try and avoid it as much as you can. Treat one-use plastic like poison, which it is. So stop using straws, stop using plastic bottles. I do this, carry a glass bottle with you wherever you go, so that you could just refill it and use it whenever you want to. The other thing that I actively think we should do is start looking at whether our workspaces are friendly. So I honestly believe this. We're a very hard-working people in India. We will do well as a country irrespective of what happens, because we're so driven and we're so hardworking. But I think that the risk that we run is we're sort of tightening the group of people who are allowed to excel. There's a Hindi term for a backward class in India. It's called pichde varg, which is effectively, literally means people who get left behind. We've increased the number of people who get left behind because we have workspaces that are not friendly to those who have physical disabilities. I mean, we have workspaces that are not friendly to those who have mental disabilities. We don't freely hire or invite people who are blind or deaf or have any other kind of disability, people who need wheelchairs, people who walk slower than us, people who have small children to care of or elderly parents to take care of. As a result, people who have any of the above problems I just named feel compelled to hide it. And hiding it is an even bigger risk because then they're not solving it. So imagine if we created, all I'm saying is that whenever you walk into any space, ask, why aren't there more women here? Why aren't there more gay, lesbian, transgender people? Why is this space wheelchair friendly? Is this space friendly to someone who is deaf, to someone who is blind, to someone who has any other issues? And we should just ask the question, because sometimes people would have not even thought about it. Just ask the question out loud, saying, hey guys, do you think this is something we can do? And we'll then generally push society to sort of think in that direction, if not anything else. We're a long way off from solving it, but at least we can ask the question.
No, absolutely right. Yeah. Well, for those of you who didn't believe me when I said I had an incredible woman on Tellis like it is today, there you go. I speak of an incredible human being, an incredible professional, and someone I have the privilege of calling family. Faye, thank you so very much.
Complete pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.